Hey all, we are joined tonight by one of my dear friends, Teresa Halverson, who is also my business partner with No Bad Books Press. And Teresa, I'm so excited to be interviewing here tonight to talk about all of your latest books. Welcome to the
Yeah,
show.
thank you. Thank you. I'm super excited to be here too. Super excited on this new endeavor and excited to see what we talk about.
Alrighty, so Teresa, in the last year, you have published quite a few books, which is really impressive and something that you and I are constantly reminding ourselves of, oh my God, we did a thing. And we're just always so willing to jump into the next project that we kind of stop every now and then to recognize that we did something pretty special. So here's today. We are cheersing to you for the books that you've released in the last year. And one of them, or the first of which, was Warehouse Dreams. Would you like to talk to us a bit more about that?
Warehouse Dreams is my debut novel, and I'll be totally honest, it's a very complex novel, and I've really struggled to describe it. But it's a dystopian romance. Think of it as Harry Potter meets X-Men, mix it all in a blender, add some romance, add some steam to it, and you've got Warehouse Dreams. It's about a teacher that is fighting society and honestly fighting her administration to protect students with special abilities, with in many ways special needs. Um, it's this community of wilds who are born with unique abilities, telepathy and psychokinesis, and society has basically said, no, we don't want you around us, which makes sense. I mean, I wouldn't want my teenager able to read my thoughts. Um, that would be kind of scary. So I get it, but at the end of the day, these kids need to learn, and they need to learn how to control their abilities, and that's what the school that my main character Kendall works at, which is nicknamed the Warehouse. That's what it's all about. And the romance comes from a new teacher that's joining them this year. And it's an enemies to lovers love where, there's a lot of chemistry and a lot of kind of fireworks and a lot of fighting and arguing. And then, you've got the romance after that. So it's a really fun book. And teachers that have read it have absolutely loved it. I've had a lot of people reach out to me asking about the sequel. I've had a lot of people reach out telling me how much this book has changed their life. I've had a lot of teachers tell me how much this book means to them, that somebody is really saying what's in their hearts, especially teachers of special needs kids or kids that are at impoverished schools. So yeah, that's Warehouse Dreams.
And it really is a fantastic story. It's a nice, fast paced story. And there's good catch your breath moments, which I think a lot
Mm-hmm.
of high intensity novels don't always have. And so it's nice to be able to just sit there and laugh at something that Mr. Sparklebutt is doing, or just have those moments of okay, and for the characters as well, so that they're
Mm-hmm.
not just in the cycle of fatigue, but that is something we see Kendall go through and how she tries to deal with it and how she tries to escape it. And there's one scene that I think kind of ties in with the signature drink that you have chosen for Warehouse Dreams, and it involves a little port, and it's a very special scene.
It is. And unfortunately, I don't have any port here. But it's this wonderful scene between Kendall and Stephen, who's a love interest. And she's having one of those horrible, horrible days. One of those days, her anxiety is super high. She's a very flawed character. Her anxiety is super high. She comes up to the rooftop to try to escape, try to get away from it, try to calm down. And Stephen ends up joining her on the rooftop, and he also is having a terrible day. He's adjusting very, very poorly to the warehouse, to the number of hours, to the lack of resources, to how difficult the students are. So he comes up to the roof to kind of like have his, ports. And Kendall's up there. And because neither of them are in a very good place and neither of them are listening to what the other one's trying to say, they end up getting rip roaring drunk and having this knockdown, not physically knockdown, but verbally knockdown fights that literally rocks the building. Because, you have to remember, they're both psychokinetics as well. and it's this wonderful moment between them. And what's so funny about it is that afterwards, Stephen goes to apologize to her, and she's like, "What happened last night? I have no memory. Why are you apologizing to me?" Because she was so drunk. And he's telling her some of the stuff that she said, and she's like, "Well, that was really crappy of me to say." So it's a fun scene. As I said before, Kendall is so grossly flawed. She does have some addictive tendencies as well. Hence the port. Hence also the gin that I did bring. So this is a gin and tonic.
Classic,
Yeah,
classic beverage.
classic. Um, but she's also very, very sarcastic. And so those take a breath moments a lot of times come from her sarcasm and from her inner monologue of kind of analyzing what's going on around her, and naming her cat Mr. Sparklebutt, because why not?
Everybody needs a Mr. Sparklebutt.
Yes, I was really shocked that that name made it through the edits. It was kind of a placeholder. And then nobody ever said you should change that name, so I left it.
I rolled with it when I saw it. I was like, this is it. This is what I'm naming my next cat.
Right?
So it'll be interesting to see how many Mr. Sparklebutts we have. And listeners, if you've read this book and you've named a pet Mr. Sparklebutt, be sure to let us know. We will give you a shout out, I assure you. So that's a bit about Warehouse Dreams. And again, it's a really great story. And of course, I'll have all the links to all of Teresa's works in the show notes or description below. So that was your first novel that you came out with. And now your second one was River City Widows, which is a very different, well, not terribly different, but a different genre, and one that is wonderful for the spooky season we are approaching.
Yeah, so River City Widows is a paranormal women's fiction, and it's about a widow. She's a young widow, but her stepdaughter brings a Ouija board home from college, which, as we all know, is a really bad idea. So the opening scene is when Tasia, the main character's name, when she walks in on her stepdaughter and her son using the Ouija board. And then, of course, all of a sudden, all these sounds start. There's all this thumping down the stairs, and they come to realize that the woman that owned the house before them, who was also a widow, may be still in the house and maybe trying to tell them something. And of course, being a ghost, she can't like come out and just like be like, "Hey, don't do this." This thing, but the message kind of gets a little bit muddled. They end up finding a secret room in the house, and of course there's a romance with it. So there's a hunky neighbor who's renting the back house on the property, and he comes over a lot and he helps them out. And it's a really wonderful motherhood story about a widow who's trying to come to terms with her loss, trying to open herself up for romance, but also needs to rebuild her relationship with her stepdaughter as well, because she has missed that tremendously. And her stepdaughter still has not recovered from the death of her father either. So it's not in any way lighthearted or anything else, but it is on the lighter side of these kind of paranormal women's fiction. So it's a fun one. It's spooky. There's definitely some moments. There's one moment where they have to leave the house very dramatically. Basically, they get chased out. But it's a lot of fun. It's a fun book, and it's based in my hometown, Sacramento. So if you're from Sacramento, there's a lot of Easter eggs in there. I talk about the zoo, the Railroad Museum, Fairy Tale Town, all sorts of fun stuff. So if you're a fan of Sacramento, you'll recognize a lot there.
You can tell that Teresa and I are good friends because she has basically been anticipating almost all the questions I've had for her this evening. And unlike most of my guests who I send the list of questions ahead of time, we were both like, man, let's just riff it. And of course, she's got them already. So then I go through my Rolodex of questions that I had on hand. Now, you said Sacramento is the setting of this story. Now, the house in particular is something that's very special and something that's old timey. Do you want to describe the setting a little bit more?
Sure. So I actually based it around one of my wonderful, wonderful friends' houses. She's in East Sacramento. And so Tasha's house and my friend's house was built in the 1940s. Um, and because of that, it's old. It's got some structural problems to it, but it's really well built for this family and this family dynamic. The stairs are kind of a central point of this story, as is the gardens as well. And I really tried very hard to capture the East Sacramento charm. If you've listened to Semi Sages of the Pages, there's an episode titled "I Know All the Trees in Sacramento," because I wanted to know the names, the different types of trees that line the streets in East Sacramento. And I ended up finding somebody's thesis that like analyzed all the Sacramento trees. So if you read it and you hear like, oh, the streets were lined with plane trees, that's because I read that thesis. So yeah.
And that's something that's so, listeners, if you're new, Teresa and I are both two of the four Semi Sages of the Pages, which is a writing podcast. And a topic that we talk about a lot because it comes up a lot is how we get lost in the research and how easy it is for that to happen. And of course, it adds layers to our stories. But it's interesting as an author to see how far down the rabbit hole we sometimes will go. So it's those little details that we sew into our stories that we hope that you'll identify with or appreciate. And I love that episode. That was a lot of fun.
Well, the hard thing is that once you find out that information, you can't not use it. Because then you're like, well, I'm kind of lying about what kind of trees they are if I call them oaks or maples.
It becomes your duty as an author to make sure the correct
Yes.
information is on the page. Absolutely. So, one of the things that you mentioned in your description about River City is the relationship between Tasia and her stepdaughter. And that's a really interesting dynamic because her stepdaughter is older. She's in college or just started college. And she has her mom, her biological mom, but their relationship is a little on the fence as well. And Tejas also has this young son, and all she wants to do is give this poor kid the birthday week of his life. And she's just met with trial after trial after trial. And you see her just, in a way, and almost not intentionally, subconsciously pushing her family away.
Yeah.
And that's a big part of the themes of what's motivating Tasia. And you want to talk a little bit about her psychology of why she's pushing them away?
Yeah. So, what Tasia's trying to do is that she has decided, okay, time enough. I need to get over this. I need to get over my depression. I need to regain control of my life. So she has decided to become very rigid in her thinking. So in so doing, she has said, I shall give my son the best birthday week of his entire life. So she plans it out. She plans out absolutely every little facet of it. She wants to do these decorative cakes every single night. And so she's researched and Pinterest and practiced and everything else. She knows exactly, day one, we're going to go to Fairy Tale Town. Day two, we're going to go to Folsom Lake. Day three, we're going to go to the Railroad Museum in Old Town and hit the candy store with all the candy barrels and everything else. And naturally, of course, a ghost is going to interrupt that. But so is her stepdaughter coming home suddenly. And so there's a lot of frustration from Tasia where she misses her stepdaughter a lot. She wants to have that relationship, but she's also angry at her for leaving her when she needed that help to raise her son, help to deal with her loss as well. And then she also lost a friend because a stepdaughter, a teenage stepdaughter relationship with a stepmother is going to be very different than Polly, the stepdaughter's relationship with her own mom. And so Tasia's also mourning that loss as well. And so there is some definite battling back and forth between Tasia and Polly as they try to heal themselves both from missing each other's relationship and also the loss of Tasia's husband and Polly's father as well. So, I tried I have a degree in psychology, and I really use that with Kendall, but I also tried really hard to use that with Tasia too. Um, and Polly, as they go through the mourning process. Um, Polly bringing a Ouija board home is not just like, hey, I just want to have a fun game here. She's using it to try to process and heal. So, there's definitely an undercurrents of loss and sadness to the story too.
And dealing with it and and
Mm-hmm.
healing. And I
Mm-hmm.
think Tasia and her family members go through very real emotions of trying to process it all. And that was something that really stuck out to me about her, was that she was so busy that she couldn't even make herself, a proper margarita, which we'll talk about in a second. And was just trying to do everything right, but was so busy because it was her way of trying not to be
Mm-hmm.
depressed, trying not to be hung up in her emotions. And she hadn't even cleaned out the closet yet of her husband's clothes, which is a very normal, very
Mm-hmm.
common reaction of mourning, is just, I'm not going to deal with that because, oh my gosh, is that going to open up a can of worms of emotions? And who would want to face that? And so we really see that with Tasia.
Yeah, there's a lot of deliberateness in the language that I use. She shuts away the master bedroom, doesn't go into it, and she refers to it as the room they don't use. And then her bedroom, which is downstairs, she refers to it as the room she sleeps in. So there's a lot of very intentional language choices with that. And with mourning and with loss, you unless you really dig into it and you dig into your thoughts, you just kind of learn to live around it. And that's really what Tasia's doing. And finding out her house is haunted and that there's another widow kind of stirring things up forces her to come to terms with a lot of her loss and a lot of her mourning, and forces her to start the healing process. But it's not always nice. I mean, there's definite moments in there where she's very sad and she's very mourning this. Um, but she also has, a hunky neighbor waiting in the wings.
And that's a very entertaining side of the story, because you can tell that she is interested and wants to make that leap, but is afraid to just yet. And that's totally understandable. And one of the things that we talked about trying to figure out, what would Tasia's drink be? What would the signature drink of this book be? And we were kind of texting back and forth that it'd be something quick and easy that she could either just pop open and pour and go. And so we came to, what was it, a Costco margarita?
Costco margarita. So that's the other drink I have here. And Costco, by the way, best mix ever. I'll throw a little bit of like an orange liqueur in it, just a tiniest little floater, and that kind of helps a little bit too. But Costco margaritas, they're the best.
And this
And
plug
so I
brought to
have
you
them in
by.
those too, right?
I ended up getting one of the Cutwater,
Mm.
Bloody Mary, one of the Cutwater margaritas, because I didn't have time to make it to Costco. But also something I felt was in Tasia's wheelhouse, because it's just a quick pop open and there you go. No fancy cup, just ice and a glass,
Yeah.
because who has time for that? And Tasia doesn't really strike me as somebody who would give herself the time to relax
No,
in when we
no,
first meet her.
no, absolutely not. Yeah. And if she does, like she does read a fair amount, she's going to do it as a way to escape, not to like relax, but a way to like be like, I'm not thinking about that. I'm not processing those emotions. I'm going to read and I'm going to focus 100% on this so I don't have to deal with the other stuff. Yeah. I'm excited for the sequel of that one too.
So can you tell us a little bit more about it?
No.
It's top secret.
No, I'm still working on it. Actually, I'm working on right now. My biggest focus is on the sequel to Warehouse Dreams. The sequel to River City, I've got some really good ideas for, but I want to plot them out a little bit more before I get there. Yeah.
So listeners, you're just going to have to follow Teresa to find out what
Mm-hmm.
happens next. Now, we have a listener question from Amanda from Reno, Nevada, who read River City Widows. And she would like to know if you could, yes, if you could elaborate a bit more on why the big antagonist in River City Widows targeted just Tasia, as opposed to Tasia, her son and stepdaughter.
That's a really good question. And thanks, Amanda, for asking that. Um, well, kind of this is going to go a little bit into kind of the sequel, but I would say the big antagonist, not quite sure how to put this without giving away too much and without also giving away plots that I haven't fully worked through. He doesn't like women. He really has a very, just really doesn't like women at all. And widows, I think with kind of the emotions and everything else, the main antagonist finds it easy to kind of work their way into it, work their way into that emotion and make it seem, I don't know how to put it, basically intensify the negative emotions, so that, yeah, I would say intensify the negative emotions so that there's nothing left other than depression and anxiety and paranoia. And I'll leave it at that.
Well done, not doing any spoilers. And
Well,
that was
thank
very,
you.
I had to kind of reword it too. So not to, but yeah, thank you again, Amanda, for submitting that. That's an excellent question. Definitely something I want to see play out in the subsequent stories. Now, Teresa, here we are upon spooky season, and you and I wrote a spooky book together.
We did. We did. It's one of my favorites. I love it.
And it's something we're getting a lot of very good comments and questions about. And we have a listener question for it as well. And so the book we're talking about, listeners and watchers, if you haven't seen it yet, is called Lost Aboard. And it's about the souls trapped aboard the historic tall ship, the Star of India, which is the flagship of San Diego Maritime Museum's historic fleet. And Teresa and I started talking about this probably about a year ago, maybe a little more than a year ago at this point. And we were talking about how we both wanted to write historic creative pieces, but we weren't sure if we wanted to do historical fiction or if we wanted to do straight up nonfiction. So we came up with this creative nonfiction piece, and it's something we hope to replicate in other stories and with other pieces of history, Sacramento, San Diego's Old Town, and other familiar locations like that. But we started with the Star of India. And there's something quite special about that place and something that we've talked about a lot, which is that living or dead, people are drawn to this vessel. Mm-hmm. And even I worked there at the Maritime Museum for 7.5 years. And Teresa, every time she comes down to visit, sees this place and sees the magic and splendor. And the volunteers who go down there just love that place so much. They pour their blood, sweat, and tears aboard the ships. And it is just such a magical place. And you want to talk a bit more about that project that we did?
Yeah, so that one was really fun. So Star of India is so incredibly, incredibly haunted. And what's really fascinating about it is that we were able to identify spirits that were tied to a lot of the different activities. And then we were able to go back in history and say, okay, this ghost, this Johnny, this Mick Barnett, these were actual people who came aboard Star of India. And so what we did with that was then we imagined what their lives were like when they were aboard Star. And then we interspersed those with interviews with the volunteers and the crew and the staff. And then we imagined kind of what they were like. And so we've got some really, really spooky moments in there. There's this wonderful, wonderful scene where one of the volunteers was working at, one of the staff was working at a bar. And throughout it, she's just feeling like something is staring at her, something is staring at her, something is staring at her. And she actually like sees, like she pulls up her phone at one point to check the time, and she actually sees eyes over her shoulder. And there's Johnny as well, and Johnny was the stowaway turned crew who unfortunately fell and died. And he's this wonderful, wonderful trickster, and there's so many stories about him, like drawing S's on tourist backs and just teasing people. He loves Sarah. I mean, all the stories, not all the stories, but a lot of the stories were from Sarah and his interactions with her. He really does enjoy teasing her.
And my
But what,
friends.
and yeah, and your friends. But what's so interesting about Star is that there's not a lot of malevolence aboard. It's
Right.
a lot of either, you know, ghosts kind of playing with the tourists and playing with the staff, or it's kind of the time ghosts, the ones that just kind of keep repeating the same thing over and over and over again, like the footsteps, the repetitive ghosts, the footsteps aboard, and that type of thing. But it's a wonderful ship. If you're in San Diego, please check it out. Um, and just really take your time going through it. And you never know, you may end up with a ghost tracing an S on your back.
Now, for you paranormal adventurers out there, there are definitely a couple of places on board where you can kind of find those repetitive spirits if they're in the mood, of course. There's no rhyme, reason, or formula for finding them, but we have outlined a couple of these places in the scavenger hunt that Teresa and I put together at the end of our book Lost Aboard, which we're hearing is pretty fun to follow along with. So that's a really cool thing. And if you go out and do that, be sure to tag us if you take any photos. We love to hear about that. And our listener, Jennifer from Chula Vista, would like to know if we're going to add stories to Lost Aboard if we hear any more. Because apparently during 2020, the spirits were very, very active.
They were, they were. I think we started off putting these and some interesting research on our blog. I would absolutely say that we are open to adding more stories. So if you know of any, let us know. You never know, you might be in the second edition.
And how much fun would that be? We love updating our stories. We love hearing about those stories. So, yes, please reach out to us. I'll again make sure I have all of our contact information in the show notes below. And now, Teresa, what projects are ahead?
So, oh my gosh, there's so many projects ahead. So, No Bad Books Press, we are hard at work on wrapping up the publication of our first anthology, which is called Released. It's wonderful. Oh my gosh, the stories are so good. But the theme of it is that something got out. And so we have everything from I don't even know what to start with. We have everything from haunted toys and possessed things to boxes that were opened and something came out of it, to psychological, something got out, to psychological, something got in. It needs to get out. And we've got everything in between this one. We did go ahead and bill it as a horror one because most of our stories were in the dark horror vein, and the cover is gorgeous. Sarah did a wonderful job on the cover. So we've got that one. I've got the sequel to Warehouse Dreams that I'm hoping to be released in early 2022. I'll be honest, those of you that are like, where's the sequel? I know it's really hard to write, but I'm trying hard on that one. I would like and I don't know if this is going to happen, but I would like the sequel to River City Widows to be out in late 2022. We'll see what the universe has in store. I think that what we've learned from 2020 and 2021 is to be flexible at all costs. What else we got? I feel like we got other stuff.
You're editing. You are editing
Yes.
a whole bunch of projects.
I'm editing a lot of projects. We've got No Bad Books Press has got the Gulch Jumpers coming out. So that one's going to be out soon, early November. So working on the final edits for that one. I'm editing Blue Dragon Society, which is Sarah's book. Super excited about that one. That one's coming along really well. And then I've got some things in the wings that are looking really, really exciting. So 2021 is going to be a blast, and can't wait for 2022.
So I have one last question to follow up with. You and I talk about this a lot, and I think it's something that always bears repeating about how there's a line, there's a balance that we need to achieve between being super productive, awesome Wonder Women that we are, and also remembering that we are human and need to take breaks and to be kind to ourselves. I know. For those of you listening, she's shaking her head. But it's something that we talk about a lot, and we don't follow it for anything, but
No.
you just want to put that out there, listeners, of try to find your balance so that you can be productive and enjoy being productive, because once it becomes a job, then is it really something you want to continue to do? But be kind to yourself and allow yourself to take breaks. And I think that's something that Teresa and I talk about a lot.
I think we talk about it a lot because neither of us are very good at that.
Yeah.
And I always call it the wall thing. I honestly, I exist in this perfect line between having a full nervous breakdown and being busy. And it's this teeniest, tiniest little thinnest line. And that's where I enjoy existing, but it's hard sometimes not to cross into a full nervous breakdown. I also sometimes describe it as hitting the wall and not realizing that my nose is broken until like somebody goes, "Hey, is there something on your nose?" And I don't know. I don't know where that balance is. But yes, I 100% agree. Take time to breathe, take time to take a break. You'll find yourself to be more creative. And at the end of the day, you'll get more done.
Beautifully said. And everyone, if you are interested in her books, be sure to check out the show notes below and follow her on Facebook, Instagram. She's on TikTok now.
I'm on TikTok. Yay. No, seriously, it's a fun app.
It's addictive, and you realize that hours of your life are gone. You're like, wait, I just came in to check my notifications. What happened? But she's everywhere. I'll be sure to have all of those notes below. Be sure to listen to us on the semi-stages of the pages if you want to hear about our writing journey specifically with our other two co-hosts, Morgan and Molly. And Teresa, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's always an absolute blast to get to talk to you about your works. And cheers to you, and cheers, dears.
Cheers.
Clink.
Click. That's perfect. Hello. All right.
Is he putting his, well, he's not the one that shares your drinks.
No. Winchester, oh, he's back over here. He's just waiting. He's waiting for you to start recording, and then he'll pop up.
Putting his foot in.